Fragrance follows the wind, but roots stay in the ground. A mother's dying words, a son's failed dreams, and one old tea house by the sea where tradition and ambition collide. When success means losing everything that matters, what would you choose? Have you ever had to choose between honoring your family's legacy and chasing your own version of success? What did you do? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your story. Now, let's begin. The wind was still cold. Yunjae pulled up his beat-up minivan along the coastal road and stared out at the ocean. Gray waves rolled in slowly, then disappeared. It was the smell of home, the one he used to know. Salt air, that sharp chill, and something lonely mixed in with it all. He gripped the steering wheel tighter. At the end of the road sat an old hanok, a traditional house. The sign was faded. Four Seasons Tea House. This was the place where he used to do his homework as a kid, where his father's laughter echoed, where his mother's tea filled the air. But now, the tea house was closed. Dust on the windows. Weeds in the yard. The door opened. Yunhee stepped out. She was pushing 80, but her back was still straight. She looked at her son for a moment, then spoke. "You're here. Earlier than I thought. Nothing left for me in Seoul." The words hung there, then faded. Yunhee said nothing. "Just put water on the stove." Yunjae sat down in one of the old chairs. It creaked under him. The tea house was quiet. On the wall hung an old photograph, young Yunhee smiling by the ocean. Her husband beside her, little Yunjae in front. Yunjae stared at it for a long time. "Do you still open this place? Sometimes people stop by. Regulars, mostly. They have a cup of tea, tell me thank you." Her voice was calm, matter of fact, but Yunjae could hear something underneath it. Something stubborn. Something that refused to quit. Seoul was still fresh in his mind. The failed investment. The company collapsing. His colleagues scattering. He'd tried to hold on by himself, but all he had left was debt and emptiness. He couldn't even tell his family the truth. On the drive down to Gangneung, he kept asking himself what could he possibly start over with here. His daughter, Harin, sat quietly in the back seat holding her camera. It was the one bright thing left from her youth. She took pictures of the old teacups, the sunlight on the walls. "Grandma, this is so pretty. Like an old movie." Yunhee smiled. "Beautiful things don't change." That one sentence made Yunjae look up. The old tea house, the dusty teacups, the place where time seemed to have stopped. But something was still alive in it. Evening came. The three of them sat side by side in the yard. Wind blew in from the ocean, rustling the tea leaves. Yunhee looked at the flower bed where spring blooms were just starting to open. "They're late this year, but they always bloom eventually." It sounded like a simple observation, but to Yunjae, it meant something else. Something small flickered to life in his exhausted heart. When night fell, he started cleaning the tea house, wiping down the old menu boards, moving chairs one by one. Yunhee turned away and said, "Don't wear yourself out. You can do it tomorrow. I need to do it now. I have to start somewhere." He hung the old sign back up. Moonlight hit it just right. The four characters, Four Seasons Tea House, glowed faintly. The next morning, Harin posted one of her photos online. She titled it, "An Old Tea House by the Sea." Something about the sunlight and the hint of tea in the air pulled people in. A few days later, a stranger, a tourist, pushed open the door. "Can I get tea here?" Yunhee looked surprised for a second, then smiled. "Of course. We have a seat for you." Yunjae looked out the window. Spring light was spilling over the dusty road. He still felt uncertain, lost even, but his mother's hands, his daughter's laughter, this old tea house they were wrapping around him, slowly. That night, he stood alone in the yard. The wind passed through, shaking the chimes hanging by the door. The sound was almost like someone breathing. In this place where time had stopped, something felt like it was starting again. He closed his eyes slowly. The smell of the ocean grew stronger. Spring was really coming back. The sun climbed high. Summer had arrived. The doors of Four Seasons Tea House opened every single day. Thanks to that article and those photos from spring, customers kept coming. On weekends, tourists heading to the beach would stop by the tea house. They'd look around at the old teacups and wooden chairs, like they'd stumbled onto something rare. Yunjae moved fast. Boiling water, brewing tea, back and forth between the register and the kitchen. None of it came naturally to him. But still, he didn't mind. It felt like the tea house was coming back to life. "It feels good seeing all these people." Yunhee nodded slowly. "It does. But don't rush it. Tea needs time to taste right. People these days hate waiting. They want it fast, easy, convenient. Yunhee didn't answer. She just lifted the teapot slowly and poured warm water. A few days later, Yunjae came back with a new sign. White background, bold letters. Four Seasons Tea. Now foreign tourists can read it too. The sign should look clean, right? Yunhee stared at it for a long time before she spoke. That looks too new. This place isn't supposed to shine like that. That kind of thinking doesn't work anymore. Times have changed. Still, I like the old sign better. Your father made it himself. Yunjae didn't answer. Just climbed the ladder. The wooden sign came down, scattering dust into the air. That evening, Yunhee cleared the table without a word. Haran felt the tension between them. Dad, I think Grandma's upset. She's fine. I'll talk to her later. But the next day, nothing changed. The tea house was still packed with customers, but the two of them barely spoke. Around lunchtime, the heat got worse. Yunjae wiped the sweat off his face and said he wanted to add coffee to the menu. If we sell coffee, we'll get even more customers. Tea alone, it's limiting. Yunhee shook her head. This is a tea house. If you mix in the smell of coffee, it changes everything. We don't have the luxury of being picky right now. It's not being picky. It's protecting what matters. Short words colliding. The cicadas in the yard screamed louder. A few days later, Yunhee suddenly felt heavy in the afternoon and had to sit down. Yunjae was working when he saw his mother collapse. He rushed over. Are you okay, Mom? I'm fine. Just need to rest a little. He tried to take her to the hospital, but Yunhee waved him off. It's not that serious. Just the heat. That night, Yunhee lay in bed. Haran changed out the cold towel on her forehead. Yunjae stood in the kitchen, breathing deep. The next morning, neighbors showed up at the tea house with fruit and porridge. Yunhee, are you all right? You're pushing yourself too hard, aren't you? I'm better now. Don't worry. People gathered in the yard, fanning themselves, talking. When Haran brought out ice cream, everyone laughed. That evening, a young guy from the neighborhood made a suggestion. We're throwing a summer festival down by the beach. Why don't you guys join in? A few days later, the yard in front of the tea house was strung with lights. Music played. Kids laughed. Old folks sipped tea. Yunjae stopped working for a moment and just watched. Yunhee was still weak, but she smiled. This is what a tea house is. A place that smells like people. Yunjae lowered his head. I'm sorry, Mom. I was moving too fast. You know now. That's what matters. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Her voice was quiet, but solid. Night fell. The festival lights reflected on the ocean. People sang. Instead of tea, they drank omija, a sweet berry drink. Yunji sat next to his mother and looked up at the sky. The stars were sharp and clear. After the festival ended, he cleaned up the tea house by himself. On one of the chairs, someone had left a handwritten note. Thank you for the beautiful fragrance and the warm smiles. Yunjae read it and slowly stopped moving. Outside, the wind picked up. Summer's heat was fading. But inside him, something new was starting to burn. The next morning, he carefully washed the old teacups. Instead of a coffee machine, he put water on the stove. Haran came over with her camera. Dad, what should I shoot today? Just us. The way we are. Yunhee laughed from the kitchen. That's the best kind of picture. Yunjae thought it over again. He didn't need to change the tea house. He needed to protect it while finding a way to make it new. He took down the new sign from the door. The old wooden sign went back up on the wall. The wind blew. Sunlight spread across the letters. The name Four Seasons Tea House shone clear again. But his heart was still uncertain. He didn't know if they could keep the place going. Didn't know what kind of trouble might come next. But for the first time, he was sure of one thing. He wasn't alone anymore. That certainty became a small kind of courage, and it pushed him forward into the next season. Autumn sunlight poured over the tea house yard. The persimmon branches turned orange. Four Seasons Tea House had gotten even busier after the summer festival. People were driving in from Seoul just to visit. Yunjae was up before dawn, moving non-stop. The scent of tea filled the air. The teapot never stopped whistling. His mother, Yunhee, still stood in the kitchen, but her body wasn't what it used to be. Sit down now. I can handle the customers. If I sit, I get more tired. My hands need to move. It settles my mind. He didn't push it. His mother's stubbornness was nothing new, but a strange unease crept into his chest. Mid-autumn, the tea house was swarmed with tourists from all over the country. A TV crew asked to film. The local paper ran a feature. Yunjae wrote up an ad slogan, "Where tradition meets modern sensibility." He added new tea sets to the menu, introduced a reservation system. He wanted efficiency, but Yoonhee wasn't buying it. You can have all the people in the world, but if there's no heart, they'll scatter. We can't think like that anymore. The competition's fierce. We need a system. Yeonhee's eyes wavered for a second, then hardened. When the system comes before the people, even the tea starts tasting wrong. That night, Yoonjae sat with the books, letting out a long sigh. More customers, sure, but more costs too. Advertising, staff, packaging materials. He made up his mind. He'd reach out to an investor in Seoul. A proposal to franchise the tea house. We can open locations all over the country under this name. If we standardize Mom's touch, it's totally doable. Yeonhee went quiet. The teacup in her hand trembled slightly. That's not my touch anymore. My tea only tastes right in this house. In this air, that kind of talk doesn't work in today's world. We have to grab opportunities. There are things more important than opportunities. Things worth protecting. His voice got louder. What's left if all we do is protect? If we go under, none of it matters. They stared at each other. The only sound was the tea leaves boiling. A few days later, investors came down from Seoul. Two guys in suits walked into the tea house. They explained expansion plans and presented prototypes for branding. If we update the packaging and modernize the logo, we'll appeal to the younger demographic. Yoonjae nodded. Yoonhee said nothing. She just picked up the teapot and boiled water. A moment later, she quietly poured tea. Is this the tea with your logo on it? The investor hesitated. That's just a sample. The taste is similar. Yoonhee took a sip. Then she spoke. It has no flavor. The temperature's wrong. This house, its air isn't in it. The investors smiled and pivoted. Grandma, these days it's more about the story than the taste. Yoonjae's face hardened. Yeonhee's hand stopped moving. That night, Yoonjae sat alone by the ocean. Waves crashed against the rocks. He held a small stone in his hand. Anger and fear mixed together inside him. Was his mother wrong? Or was he? Then Haran walked up, camera in hand. Dad, I gave a presentation at school today. The topic was the scent of family. I said our house smells like the ocean. He looked up. What do you mean? No matter how hard the waves hit, the ocean stays the same. I think our family's like that. The words slowly sank into Yoonjae's chest. A few days later, Haran's photo exhibit opened. The theme was the temperature of memory. On one wall of the gallery hung scenes from Four Seasons Tea House. One photograph stopped people in their tracks. Late autumn sunlight. Yoonhee pouring tea. Below the photo, Haran had written, "Tea poured by warm hands carries the fragrance of time." Yoonjae read that sentence and couldn't move. His vision blurred. After the exhibit, he came back to the tea house late at night. His mother had turned off the lights and was sitting on the wooden floor. I saw the photos today. Haran did a beautiful job. Yoonhee smiled. What remains after time passes is always the heart. I see that now. Yoonjae slowly bowed his head. Me too. I think I'm starting to understand what you meant. Outside, the wind picked up. Persimmon leaves fell to the ground. Yoonhee ran her fingertips along the teapot sitting beside her. Winter's coming early this year. At those words, Yoonjae looked up. Her face held a gentle smile, and the traces of exhaustion. That night, he stood outside his mother's room for a long time. A faint light spilled through the crack in the door. He heard Yoonhee coughing. He didn't open the door, just stood there quietly, steadying his breath, thinking. What he needed to do now wasn't expand the tea house. It was protect his mother's time. Beyond the window, the first frost fell. The tea leaves held the cool air. In that moment, he knew. The coming winter wasn't just a season. It was the end of an era. And he was only now beginning to prepare for that end. The ocean waves grew stronger. Yoonjae closed his eyes. Cold wind brushed his face. In the air that night, the feeling of something ending stood sharp and clear. Winter wind came down from the mountain ridge. All the persimmon leaves had fallen. In the yard of the tea house, only bare branches remained. The ocean was freezing, the waves rougher than before. Yoonjae opened the door earlier than usual, but the kitchen lights stayed off. His mother, Yoonhee, was in the hospital. Last night, she collapsed. Holding the teapot, she sank to her knees without a word. Her fingertips were cold. Her lips cracked and dry. Yoonjae stood by the hospital window. Through the white curtains, he could see the ocean. The machines beeped in steady rhythm. The doctor spoke. She needs rest for a while. She's been overworked. Her heart is weak. She can't push herself anymore. He couldn't answer. Yunhee opened her eyes, smiled faintly. I'll be fine once I rest a little. You need to rest now. I'm closing the tea house for a while. You can't do that. The tea house is a promise to people. If I'm not there, the fragrance disappears. He bit his lip. The hospital air felt damp and cold. A few days later, Yoonjae reopened the tea house. But the kitchen was empty. Customers smiled awkwardly and left. Your mother's not coming out today? She's not feeling well. I came because I missed her touch. Those words cut like a knife. That evening, the investor from Seoul called. This is your opportunity. While the Gangneung location is on pause, we need to grow the brand. Sign the contract and the funding comes through immediately. Yoonjae stared out the window without speaking. The ocean was turning ash gray. He nodded. I'll get it ready. A few days later, the contract was signed. Four Seasons Tea House was set to expand nationwide. New logos and package designs were finalized. A corporate management system was put in place. That night, Yoonjae brought the papers to the hospital. Yoonhee was sitting up in bed. What's this? Mom, this is how we can keep the tea house name alive. Now it'll spread across the country. Yoonhee looked at the paper. The words Four Seasons Tea House caught her eye. This isn't my tea house. This is your name? Your touch, it's going out into the world. Yoonjae. A name getting out there doesn't matter. If the heart doesn't reach them, it means nothing. His voice rose. This is fighting back against the world. If you want your heart to reach people, it has to go out there. Yoonhee turned her head away. The sky outside the window was dark and heavy. A few days later, the first franchise opened in Seoul. The press showed up. Social media lit up. Yoonjae stood in front of reporters and spoke. This brand carries my mother's name and spirit. A cup of tea brewed by hand, that's where we started. Applause erupted. But that night, he got a call from the hospital. Yoonhee was critical. When he reached her room, his mother was barely conscious. Beyond the oxygen mask, her hand trembled weakly. Yoonjae? He held her hand. It's me, Mom. You're okay. Our name is spreading all over now. Yoonhee's gaze wavered. Is that the tea house? He couldn't answer. Tears gathered at the corners of Yoonhae's eyes. That tea house, does it smell like people? He lowered his head. Tea has to resemble people. That's the rule of my tea house. Her voice grew weaker. Yoonjae. Fragrance follows the wind, but roots stay in the ground. Her hand slowly lowered. Wind shook the hospital window. The curtains swayed softly. Winter light seeped in. Yoonjae just stood there. Didn't say a word. A few days later, the funeral was held quietly. Chrysanthemums piled up in front of the tea house. Harin stood silently in a black coat. Dad, is Grandma making tea in heaven now? He didn't answer. Just ran his hand over her hair. That night, Yoonjae walked into the tea house alone. He turned on the kitchen light. Put the old teapot on the stove. When the water started boiling, he slowly added the tea leaves. The fragrance spread. Like a very old memory, it filled the house. He covered his hands and whispered, Mom, this is me brewing tea from the beginning again. The door opened. Harin was standing there. Dad, that smell? It smells like Grandma's tea. He looked up. Yeah, this is the real fragrance of Four Seasons Tea House. At dawn, he sat in front of his computer, opened the contract file, wrote up a request to terminate corporate agreement. On the last line, he carefully wrote his name. And next to the tea house name, he added a small line. 1 cup of tea, 1 person's heart. He opened the window. Cold air poured in. In the distance, he heard the ocean breaking apart. Yoonjae wrapped both hands around the teacup. Warmth spread to his fingertips. That warmth felt like his mother's hands. Outside, the first snow began to fall. White snow settled on the branches of the persimmon tree in the yard. He closed his eyes. On the threshold of winter, one season was finally ending, and a new season was slowly blooming inside his heart. Spring came back around. The wind blowing along the coast was cold, but there was something warm mixed in. New buds sprouted between the branches of the persimmon tree. In the tea house yard, at the tips of the branches, a faint pulse of life was forming. Yoonjae slowly swept the yard. Where the snow had melted, the smell of earth rose up. From the ocean, the sound of waves rolled in, steady and sure. 3 months had passed since his mother left this world. The tea house had stayed closed the whole time. At first, people offered condolences, but now they'd gone back to their lives. Only Yunjae remained, still standing in that place. He picked up the teapot and heated water, the way his mother always did. When the water started to boil, he held the tea leaves between his fingertips. The texture was soft. He added the leaves to the pot, and a familiar fragrance rose up. That scent filling the room, it was like an old memory coming back to life. That smell. It's Grandma's tea. Hiren stood in the doorway. Her eyes glistened with tears. Yeah, it's your grandma's tea. Now it's our turn to carry it forward. Our turn? That's right. Now we're the ones protecting the fragrance of this house. His voice was quiet, but solid. A few days later, Yunjae reopened the tea house. The wooden sign above the door stayed the same. But underneath, there was a small new phrase that caught your eye. 1 cup of tea, 1 person's heart. Customers slowly started coming back. Some said they saw online that the place had reopened. Others just wandered in. Yunjae brewed tea the way his mother did, slowly, carefully. Customers held their cups quietly and took in the scent. It tastes like it used to. An older woman smiled. That touch, it's back. At her words, Yunjae bowed his head for a moment. Thank you. My mother would be happy to hear that. When night fell, the tea house filled with warm light. Harin held her camera and spent a long time photographing the kitchen. Now it finally feels like the real Four Seasons tea house. Yeah, like spring actually came back. He turned his gaze to the window. Even in the darkness, the ocean was still moving, calm and steady. His mother's words came back to him. Fragrance follows the wind, but roots stay in the ground. That sentence, he finally understood it, deep in his heart. A few days later, a small request came from the local elementary school. They wanted to hear the story of Four Seasons. Tea house for a class on traditional culture. Yunjae hesitated, but eventually agreed. When he walked into the classroom, the kids' eyes lit up. What kind of place is Four Seasons Tea House? One kid asked. It's a place where people's hearts get warm, where you share stories over a cup of tea made with someone's care. He continued slowly. When you brew tea, temperature matters. But what matters most is your heart. If your heart is warm, the tea becomes warm too. The kids nodded. One of them quietly raised a hand. So, is the tea at Four Seasons Tea House still warm? Yunjae looked out the window for a moment. Sunlight was breaking over the distant ocean. He smiled. Yeah, because someone's heart is still here. That afternoon, he returned to the tea house. When he opened the door, the familiar scent of tea greeted him. Harin was organizing photos by the window. The kids loved it today. When you talked about Grandma, everyone went quiet. That makes sense. It's not just a story. It soaks in like a fragrance. As the sun set, the wind picked up slightly. The chimes swayed, making a gentle sound. That sound was as tender as his mother's voice. Yunjae picked up the teapot and put water on the stove. And he whispered the words his mother always said. Tea is the art of waiting. The water came to a gentle boil. The tea leaves slowly unfurled. The fragrance filled the tea house. Spring sunlight poured through the glass. And in that light, he finally understood. Seasons change, but fragrance remains. And a person's heart, that's the real Four Seasons of this house. From the ocean, the cry of a seagull echoed. He lifted a teacup. Welcome. How about a warm cup of tea? His voice rang out softly. The doors of Four Seasons Tea House were wide open again.